So again, hello everyone. My name is Julie Robb here at Ida Culver House Broadview. Before we start today's presentation, I would like to share a little bit about Era Living Memory Care, which we offer in a secure home-like environment at 2 Era Living retirement communities, Ida Culver House Broadview in Northwest Seattle and the Gardens at Town Square in Bellevue. So Ida Culver House Broadview, this is we just recently opened one of our floors for our memory care for the terrace at Ida Culver House Broadview. And in recently, I mean yesterday, we did the big move for our residents, the remodeled floor, the second floor. And it is just, it really is breathtaking. They did an incredible job, and I think that all of our residents are really, really impressed with that. So we're very excited about the completion of that project. Both of these communities also offer independent assisted living on the same campus. If you are interested in learning more about our memory care program, you can visit eraliving.com/memorycare. And now on to our main event. We are honored to host David Troxel, who will be presenting on successful strategies for caregiving and family relationships. David Troxel has become internationally known for his writing and teaching in the fields of Alzheimer's disease and long-term care. He has co-authored with Virginia Bell 6 influential books and articles relating to dementia care, including his new book, The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care. So with that, I will turn it over to David Troxel. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today and present. We really appreciate it, David. Sorry, we're going to unmute you here.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. And it's great to be with you all and talk a bit about Alzheimer's disease and caregiving. Particularly during this pretty significant news week that I'll be talking about shortly, but Alzheimer's disease and care has been on the front page of every newspaper probably in the world the last few days with a new drug approval that we'll talk about in a few moments. But I'd like to say a special shout out and thank you to my friends at Era Living who embraced the best friends approach that I'm known for and have written about with my colleague Virginia Bell. And I've just so enjoyed being in your communities over the last several years. And hopefully now that the pandemic is lifting, we'll have a chance to be back in Seattle again soon. I do live in Sacramento, California, but I always have, I think, a really great heart for the Pacific Northwest. I went to a little college called Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, where I graduated from, and I have many friends from Seattle. So it's always great to be with you all today. So today I'll be talking a bit about strategies for successful caregiving and family relationships. I'm going to give a little bit of a news update on some of our drug discovery findings. And I'm delighted to say that we're going to have a number of different webinars over the next several months, kind of a whole series with Era Living on a variety of topics. So I'm sure you all are on the list and you will hear more about that shortly. So let's see, I'm just going to do a little bit of adjusting again. Thank you for being part of this great program sponsored by the Gardens at Town Square, Ida Culver House Broadview. It's a great to be with my friends, particularly since, again, Era Living has very much formally embraced the best friends approach to dementia care that you'll hear more about today and in other talks as well. I think we've covered my introductions, again, having worked in this field over 25 years in a variety of settings. Like many of you here, I've also been touched by this with my family, with my mother, Dorothy, passing away in 2008 with Alzheimer's. I might even have a picture of her in this presentation, if I recall. And so look forward to kind of covering the waterfront with you. So today we'll focus on a little bit of an update about Alzheimer's disease and dementia care today. I'm going to discuss the current drug discovery pipeline, since that is very, very timely right now. And then I hope to leave you with some very practical, almost like a toolkit of key strategies for success as a caregiver. Now, I know most of you on the call are family caregivers or care partners, as we often say today, but many of you actually might work at Era Living or more be a professional caregiver. And I think this presentation will have lots of good strategies and ideas for you as well today. I'll talk a bit about something that we could probably spend the full hour on, but just family relationships as they relate to dementia care journey. I think many of you who've been through this personally know that Alzheimer's disease can bring some families together. It can kind of tear other families apart. And so I'll at least touch lightly on this today about some strategies for getting family buy-in and involvement and better cooperation. I'll talk a bit about the benefits of utilizing services and options, including, of course, residential dementia care. I think coming out of the pandemic, things are opening up, and hopefully many of you who maybe have had in-home help in the past have gone to a day center. Many of you who maybe have been a bit fearful the last 12 months, utilizing and accessing services will now see that it's actually a really good time to begin making your game plan for that kind of post-COVID future. Okay. So where are we today? Well, I was very taken by a cover story that came out maybe, I don't know, 5-6 weeks ago in Barron's magazine, this weekly magazine sponsored by the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones on finances. But look at the interesting headline, Barron's magazine, The Other Pandemic. And this was very much about Alzheimer's disease, because until COVID hit, I think easily one of the greatest concerns of our country has been Alzheimer's disease, because not only, as you'll see from this slide, is it the 6th leading cause of death in the US, it's the only one of the top 10 diseases that doesn't really have an effective cure or truly impactful treatment. And we know Alzheimer's disease is also very costly, 305 billion raising to over $1 trillion by 2050, according to some very reputable sources. And there are people who believe that Alzheimer's disease and these other dementias are the most expensive illness in the United States, more expensive than heart disease or cancer, in part because of their longevity. Now, again, those numbers have probably not been updated because of the pandemic, which arguably has been, so costly in terms of lives and health and wellness and our economy as well. But as the numbers of people with COVID are hopefully dropping, you see we have the opposite to be true with Alzheimer's disease. Unless we truly find an effective medicine that can just slow it down or a way to effectively prevent this disease, the numbers are expected to triple by the year 2050, which is an enormous concern. And this is the late breaker. It's kind of exciting to speak to you, the first group I've spoken to since the big news broke on Monday. Until this week, it's almost been, I think it's been over 18 years since we've had a new medicine approved by the FDA. A new drug, aducanumab, has now been approved and will be available very soon. We'll talk about that in a couple more slides. And this is, I think, very encouraging at many, many levels. But as I think you'll hear me say shortly, we need to do better. And this is not by any means that the breakthrough drug I think we've been hoping for, even though it may yet prove to be disease modifying for a small group of people. So I'm giving you the setup, I guess, to tease you before I get to that slide to talk about the drug. So, for those of you who've heard me speak for Air Living in the past, I think particularly last year, I was very taken by the Charles Dickens quote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." And I still think that's very relevant when it comes to dementia care. In many ways, it's the best of times because stigma's fallen away. And of course, now we have this, good new medication, we hope. We have our hopes out for that. But also research funding. It's the best of times because research funding has just come way up. And it's been one of the few examples, by the way, of bipartisanship in Washington, D.C., hard to believe. But Republicans and Democrats over the last decade or so have actually come together and supported some substantial increases in Alzheimer's disease research, now I think over $3 billion a year. Now, for those of you who may be thinking, well, gee, that sounds like a lot of money. Well, it is a lot of money, but we are still leaving important studies unfunded or underfunded. And really, even 15, 20 years ago, the number was well under $1 billion. So we have a long way to go. But with money comes science, comes research, people join the field, postdocs, doctorate students, medical students, researchers get interested in dementia care. And so I'm very optimistic that this will be an excellent investment for our country. I think the other interesting bit of good news, which again, I think we can talk more about even on a future webinar, is that, kind of the long elusive idea that maybe some lifestyle changes might delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease or even prevent it altogether. They are picking up some steam. And I think this is particularly valuable for those of you who work at Era Living or in assisted living, or those of you who are considering assisted living. But in so many ways, you'll hear me say socialization is the treatment for dementia. And when you have a lively in-home worker who encourages exercise and music, when you go to a great day center with good activities, when you choose an assisted living program with excellent activities, these all are not only good for the body, they're good for the brain. So more and more, we think that diet is very important. We love the Mediterranean diet, that diet rich in seafood, olive oil, grains, nuts, vegetables, less red meat, less dairy. It's the only diet, by the way, that's clinically been shown to add to longevity. It also seems to be a very brain-friendly diet. Exercise. Of all the things out there that we think might actually positively impact our chances for getting Alzheimer's disease or not, is exercise. People who exercise regularly may get Alzheimer's disease later in life than people who don't. And if you have Alzheimer's disease and you stay active and you exercise, it may even slow it down. This is one reason when I've talked to my friends at Era Living, for example, they try to do exercise twice a day because it's also very popular. Social engagement. I think this is very fascinating stuff. There have been some studies that suggest that people who have a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, or partner, they may get Alzheimer's disease later in life than the loners. People who've, been active in their faith communities, join clubs, have friends. Again, this idea of the brain-loving company, very powerful. And there are a few other interesting areas that they're exploring now about lifestyle. As the public health community would say, people who have good sleep hygiene. Another way of saying that is you get enough sleep every night. That seems to be very protective of the brain. Sleep, getting lots of good sleep, and controlling blood sugar. There are definite links between diabetes and the risk for Alzheimer's disease. People with uncontrolled diabetes might have some damage or lower cognitive scores. So be sure to monitor your blood pressure and your blood sugar. And lifelong learning, I'll give you an example of that during this presentation. But people who stay active intellectually, this again may be very good for the brain. Now, I want to be very, very clear here. These are lifestyle factors that might influence the course of illness. We all have risk factors for different things, but just because you have a risk factor, for example, if you're an introvert or single, or maybe you have diabetes, it doesn't mean you're going to get Alzheimer's, but it's a risk factor, right? Now, you might have a professor at the University of Washington who's won the Nobel Prize for something and is a vegan and runs and exercises, and he still gets Alzheimer's disease. And people might say, well, gosh, David, he got Alzheimer's. That must mean that your lifestyle evidence doesn't work. Well, on the contrary, you see, maybe if this brilliant scientist gets Alzheimer's at 85, well, you see, perhaps his lifestyle was actually neuroprotective. Maybe he would have gotten ill at 75 had he not have had this good health. So that's kind of where we are looking at with much of our medical advances. Now, a very interesting annual survey that I'm sure you can find online, I think it's in the public domain, Dr. Jeff Cummings of Cleveland Clinic, he and his colleagues do an annual review of the research medication pipeline for Alzheimer's disease. And this is from last year, but I think it's kind of encouraging and very interesting. In 2020, there were 121 unique therapies in clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease. About 30 of them were in what we call the phase 3 trial for that kind of final step for potential approval. The majority were targeting disease onset or progression. 12 of these studies, though, were aimed at behavioral symptoms of dementia, which is, again, very interesting. Dr. Cummings writes that there's actually a much greater diversity to approaches in these studies than there has been in the past. So many of our studies in the past have looked at this protein in the brain called amyloid, and kind of creating these drugs that might strip away some of the amyloid. In fact, the new drug does that. It's been approved. But a lot of people are skeptical of this theory. So I'm very happy that there's now more diversity. And this is, I think, really encouraging, particularly during our time of pandemic. The current studies have over 31,000 participants who volunteered to help the cause of Alzheimer's disease. So I think that's really terrific. All of us who've been touched by this disease certainly want to help others. Okay, now I kind of teased this and set it up, but in case you aren't aware, there was some really rather stunning news on Monday when the FDA approved a new drug. This is the first drug in almost 20 years to be approved for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, a compound developed by Biogen, I think they're in Massachusetts, called aducanumab. It will have a new trade name they announced this week of Aduheim. And this is a drug that we think will break up or prevent some of the accumulation of this sticky substance in the brain called amyloid. And by taking amyloid out of the brain, or sort of helping stop it from being built up, we hope that this might actually improve symptoms, even if it doesn't stop the underlying course of illness. Now, this drug, many experts believed, would not be approved on Monday. The clinical trials have been sketchy, honestly. They've had a lot of ups and downs. Biogen originally withdrew the drug from the marketplace, but then kind of retweaked the data. And based on that, and what they believe is a subset of people who actually did better under the drug than was expected, they presented their case to the scientific community and to the FDA, and they actually pulled it off and won approval on Monday, despite the fact that the staff at the FDA had recommended approval, but their outside advisory board of really eminent scientists voted heavily to not approve this drug. The Alzheimer's Association put their prestige behind the drug, believing that there are lots of good things that will come from this. I'll talk about in a moment. But bottom line is it made it. It made it, which I think ultimately is a good thing for several reasons. This drug looks like it might help people in the earliest stages of Alzheimer's when it's identified early. I think that will also help encourage earlier diagnosis. The downside is it's an infusion. You have to take grandmother to an infusion center. I don't remember or know actually if it's once a month or twice a month. About 30 or 40%, I believe, of the people experiencing this drug might have some minor brain bleeds, if that sounds like it can be minor. So there have to be some MRI scans along the way to make sure your brain is okay. But bottom line, there were people who were in the clinical trials who reported an enhanced memory for a longer period of time. So stay tuned. You know, in many ways, I think the FDA kind of came up with a decision that maybe pleased nobody, but pleased everybody, which is they approved the drug for immediate use, by the way. But they've also demanded that Biogen do yet another study of the people who are taking this drug to see if it works. Okay, final comment on this, then we'll move on. You'll be reading a lot about it. I have to say the drug is modest from my point of view and what it will do, but of course, so many of us are looking desperately for answers. The drug is going to initially be priced, according to Biogen, at about $55,000 to $65,000 a year. And one study I read, I think from Cigna Health Insurance, said that probably your copay will be $10,000. So talk to your doctor, discuss this, see where you stand. I think if there's really, to me, one of the best things about this approval is that I think it is going to encourage other pharmaceutical companies to jump back into this effort, because a number of them had left it because of all the different disappointments. So I think that's enough on this drug, but we can do more in Q&A. So, okay, where are we now? We've had some good news that there's a new drug that might help some people a little bit. That's still good news. But meanwhile, what now? Because the truth is we need to do better. We need a better drug. So as always, particularly when I'm talking to families, be sure to get your legal and financial affairs in order. If it's your spouse, you want to still have a power of attorney for each other, because the person might gradually lose capacity or will gradually lose capacity. You want to keep the person as healthy as possible. Learn all you can about caregiving. The Alzheimer's Association, Mayo Clinic, hopefully this seminar will give you lots of good ideas. Learn ways to improve quality of life, including the best friends approach to communication, activities, and behavioral challenges. And don't wait to use services. So just a few little kind of setups for me to kind of move on here as well. So let's talk a bit about health. And this is a slide that I have used before with a couple of my past Era Living talks. I update it here and there, but it's probably one of my favorite slides I use in my presentations. And I'm very grateful to Dr. Mike McLeod at UC Davis, who gave me permission to use this slide. And he basically says that Alzheimer's disease and these other dementias don't travel alone. Don't travel alone. He says, watch for treatable things that if you miss or leave untreated, make everything worse. So on the right are some of the things Dr. McLeod, who's a geriatrician, says we should be attentive to: pain, depression, malnutrition, particularly for people living by themselves, over medication, medication errors, polypharmacy, when someone's seeing different doctors and getting the same different medications for the same issue. They're almost being double or triple over medicated. Blood sugar, sleep, stroke, alcohol, and of course, loneliness and isolation. What an enormous struggle that has been during the pandemic, right? So basically what he's saying here is that people with Alzheimer's disease and other dementia, in part because of their age, in part because they may not have the wherewithal to have been taking good care of themselves, they often have these other issues, right? Now you see, if I have a little bit of a headache, I can usually power through my day anyway, right? If I have a little bit of pain, I'll take a couple aspirin and just, keep going. But people with dementia are often less resilient than the rest of us, okay? So we want to be sure that if the person is having some pain or depression or these other issues, that we're aware of it, because if we miss them, their cognitive levels are going to decline, their behaviors are going to go up. We're really hurting their quality of life, and it's making our job as caregivers tougher, right? You see, when you think about it, if I have a toothache, I can call my dentist. I can recognize the toothache and get it taken care of, hopefully in a timely manner. But if you have dementia, you might experience that pain, but not be able to connect the dots, not be able to ask to go to a dentist. And of course, pain can be very, very oppressive and lead to lack of appetite and behavioral issues as well. So particularly those first two, keep an eye on pain, depression. About 40% of people who have Alzheimer's disease or other dementia will experience depression during their illness, so watch for depression. And we haven't even put down one here like urinary tract infections, a UTI, things like that can lead to issues. One of the kind of general rules of thumb that I like to say is that most of these dementias are pretty slow and progressive. My mother's neurologist, Dr. Harbaugh, used to say they're kind of like a slow and lazy river dementia, right? And so what he always said was, if there's a sudden change, mom's sort of trooping along, doing okay, and suddenly kind of goes in a decline, it's probably because one of the things on this page. So again, without a good medicine, if we can keep them healthy, that really helps. But the treatment for Alzheimer's disease is in many ways socialization. It's you, it's me, it's a caring staff. Evidence supports the value of this engagement: exercise, music, art, lifelong learning. What's very exciting is many of the ideas that I first wrote about 30 years ago when I began writing with my colleague Virginia Bell about the best friends approach. Many of them, the evidence has caught up that these actually have an evidence-based or evidence-influenced practice to really make things better. And I know this is something particularly true of my friends at Era Living and for other really progressive contemporary providers of good care. So I now want to sort of pivot a bit and just I always like to give you all some specific tools to take and run with if you're a family caregiver, particularly at home. And I guess the first thing I would say, and this is part of my best friends philosophy, what a person with dementia needs is a best friend. And as a friend, we know each other well. I know who I can throw a surprise party for and my friends, and who would never speak to me again. I know my friends' favorite colors, whether they're cat people or dog people or both or neither. I know how they drink their coffee often. And we want to have the same level of awareness about our family members with dementia. And particularly if you have someone caring for them who doesn't know them intimately, you want to make sure that they understand this. So Era Living, I think, has a very clever tool that you can easily adapt for your own home setting. They call it Top 10 Things to Be a Best Friend. And it's basically a little kind of mini cheat sheet about someone's life story. So you want to jot down the person's professions, hobbies, talents, and awards. I'll never forget one time I met a woman who had still remembered winning Miss 7th Grade Square Root. So there's some great awards out there. Food favorites, maybe someone's from New Orleans, they love hot and spicy food. Favorite stories or life milestones. I had a gentleman one time who remembered running away from home when he was like 11 or 12 and walking across the Brooklyn Bridge by himself. And even though now he was in his 80s, when we would cue him and remind him of this old story, he would just tell it in vivid detail, and it would really cheer him up. He was a very kind of fun memory, probably not so much fun for his parents, but he loved telling the story. Hometowns, daily rituals. I have to have my morning cup of black coffee, hopefully from Starbucks, and even spiritual connections. So how this might work is, if your grandmother has dementia, let's say she has to go to the ER. Let's say you have someone coming in to help her at home. Let's say you move her into assisted living. It really does help the staff very powerfully to know how to engage her and make the connection. So be sure that you complete a life story card or do something like this for your family member. Now, I mentioned my mom, Dorothy, earlier. I had a wonderful mom. I miss her very much. My mother was Canadian. She had a beautiful British accent because her parents were British. And my mother got Alzheimer's, passed away 2008, but she lived much of her life overseas in Hong Kong and France and in Germany. And here's a picture of her in Paris, France in the 1950s. And I think it's a great picture. But the reason why I want to show this picture is that my mother had a lifelong, almost a lifelong, kind of ritual of drinking hot tea. And she particularly loved Earl Grey tea with milk, okay? Now, when my mother moved into memory care here in Sacramento, I told the staff about this. And if she was having a bad day, they would often say, Dorothy, how about I make you a lovely cup of Earl Grey tea with milk, just the way you like it? Ah, heaven, it changed her mood. She felt like, I know you, you know me, and everything went better. So a good example that even though in my dream world, for example, staff would know 100 things about each person with dementia, sometimes just knowing one or two things can make a big difference. Okay, at Era Living, a lovely quote here, life stories that helped us make the connection with our residents, be a best friend during the time when family limits were visited. Again, who knew this would happen, of course, but having this life story piece has been very valuable for the staff there as well. So some strategies for effective communication, because I like to, again, share a number of different things here. Whoops, there we go. Sadly, communication centers of the brain are usually profoundly damaged by dementia, okay? The person with dementia will gradually be unable to understand what we are saying to that person. They'll have trouble communicating their needs to us. Many people with dementia lose the ability to read and kind of process written language. I wonder with that drug study from Dr. Cummings with the, 121 studies, wouldn't it be something if someone invented a medicine that might better protect the language centers of the brain? That would be an enormous accomplishment. But meanwhile, we know that language suffers, not to mention the fact that their forgetfulness means that even if you say to mom, hey mom, would you go to your room and get the red sweater, she might come out with a blue hat. She forgets. So here are just a few tips. Minimize distractions, because I know often they're looking at everything else going on in the room. Make eye contact, use some hand gestures, give them lots of different ways to see what you're trying to say. Smile, practice positive emotional communication. They often are looking for that friendly face. And a couple of these may seem a bit odd to you if you're a family member, but I always want to remind people to give lots of compliments. The world of dementia, it's a tough one. The person has had a lot of losses. Maybe they've had to give up their car, give up their checkbook. They're a bit fearful. They don't always know quite what's happening around them. Their self-esteem must really suffer, particularly people who know what's going on, because many people with dementia kind of have a sense of what's happening to them. So I say, give lots of compliments. Georgine, you look so beautiful today in your pretty pink sweater. Dr. Smathers, I can't believe you delivered 1,000 babies in your career. You are really a hero. Yeah, mom, you won the Teacher of the Year award, or mom, you made the best cheesecake. All of those things are very positive. Giving some simple choices. Do you want to wear the red sweater today or the blue sweater? Even if they always pick the color red, I think giving someone a choice helps them feel like they're more in control over their life. Asking for opinions. Do you like my shirt? What do you think? Is this a nice color on me? When you ask somebody their opinion, it means that you value them, okay? So again, maybe you have a professor in your assisted living program who was the dean of the College of Engineering. Ask him about bridge building, ask him about infrastructure, ask him for educational advice. All of these things, again, I think show you care about the person. Don't ask too many questions. People with dementia forget. And sometimes families almost want to test their memories. Mother, do you know who I am? Mother, do you remember this? Well, you see, they have forgotten in most cases, which is very frustrating, but they're still in the moment. They often know they should know. So when you ask them a question that they can't answer, it does cause frustration. And can be damaging. Fill in the blank. Mother, did you enjoy your bacon and eggs today? Or Dad, what are your thoughts about those wonderful years we spent in Hawaii? Things to give them their cues. Don't argue or correct. So fundamental, and yet I think families particularly, and sometimes staff fall into that as well. Remember that the memory loss is real. It doesn't mean you can't gently cue them, but if mom says that President Obama is doing a great job, you don't want to say, no, he's not the president. You might just say, I like him too, just to let go of these little things. And when things do go wrong, I always say kind of fall on the sword. It's okay to say, hey, Mom, I'm sorry, I messed that up. I'll do better next time. I love you, I'm sorry. And again, moving things along that way. Try 3 times to turn a no into a yes. Remember, the people with dementia often say no to everything, right? They say no because they don't necessarily understand what you're asking them, right? So maybe you say, Mother, gosh, it's a beautiful day today. Would you like to go to the garden? Oh, no, dear, I'm tired. Now, Mom, roses are out, and red's your favorite color. They're spectacular. I think you enjoy seeing them. Oh, not today. And maybe number 3, Mom, take my arm now. Come on. You studied to be a master gardener. You're so good at this. I don't think our gardener is doing a great job at pruning. Please come. I want to get your advice about whether we should keep that gardener. Oh, okay. And you turn a no into a yes. And again, if you don't quite understand what's happening, tell me more about that. Just ask these open-ended questions. And finally, sort of affirming words, I think just to be positive, to be demonstrative is very powerful. Mother, what would I do without you? And you're a wonderful mom. I'm so happy to be here today. Particularly during a visit, if you're visiting someone in memory care, these are all really good things. And I love this, this quote. I'm working on a little essay about it right now, in fact. But, Maya Angelou certainly did not write this about Alzheimer's disease, but I think it's incredibly powerful and really could have been written about Alzheimer's. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. This emotional memory, I think, is enormously important. And of course, a real sadness and blow for so many of us is that, sometimes your mother might forget that, I'm David, her son. Very painful, but I think even if they can't name the relationship, they often, of course, I think, can still recognize that you're someone special. That emotional connection remains. A few more things we'll kind of cover, just again with my kind of giving you a bit of a toolkit today. Dementia-related behavioral changes. It's a myth that everybody with dementia is somehow violent or combative or difficult, but they often can be triggered, sometimes by even things we do or their environment. They're just trying to make sense of their world, and maybe they've hidden the purse under their pillow and don't know where it is. You walk in and they accuse you of stealing it. Well, it's not because they're mean-spirited or suspicious per se, but they were just sure the purse was there. They've forgotten they've hidden it. You walk in, well, in their brain, 1 + 1 = 2. The purse was there. It's not there now. You came, you went, you must have taken it. So we, again, have to kind of walk a mile in their shoes. But, things like refusal to do personal care showers, paranoia, apathy, aggression, these delusions, these fixed false ideas, hiding things, hoarding, rearranging, all these can be common, right? So how do we begin to address these? Well, again, a future webinar, I think we can cover more of these in greater detail, but I'll just at least mention a few things here. Look for causes for triggers. Is it a certain time of day? Is it around a certain person? Sometimes, we can figure things out. I remember once there was a woman who during parts of the day would get pretty agitated, and we finally figured out that glare was coming in through the windows. Glare can actually be physically painful to the older eye, and we actually were able to kind of reposition her, get some better curtains and blinds, and solve the problem. In depression, again, sudden changes can indicate something's going on. Medication issues, have there been recent changes in meds? That can be a factor. And again, don't label or blame. Practice empathy. Remember, it's the disease, not the person. One other tip that's really not on the slide, but when I am having a behavioral issue with a person with dementia, I will often pull out their social history, their life story, and just read it to see if I can not only find clues, maybe they're agitated around dogs because they're afraid of dogs, right? But sometimes too, it can also help you redirect them more successfully. If someone loves big band music or loves country western and loves Dolly Parton. Maybe you can put on some of that music and change the mood. Maybe you can find that someone loves spiritual music and play that kind of music, and that can also be very powerful. All right. So again, I think I've kind of alluded to this a little bit. I love the picture of the, the bunny rabbit. But as you're thinking about some of the behavioral challenges, it's okay to call some friends or family members, call in some help from a geriatric care manager, or maybe even call your friends at Era Living or the Alzheimer Association, brainstorm some ideas. We had a lady one time who developed this odd behavior where she kept putting socks and paper and Kleenex in a toilet bowl and flush, and was causing all these floods. Well, you can only kind of keep an eye on someone. You can't really watch them 24/7. And, they wanted to get her to use the bathroom. Well, they finally had the idea that they would actually adjust the environment. There's that little valve underneath the toilet bowl. They would turn it off each time in between use. And that way, at least if she puts the toilet bowl and flush, it wouldn't cause quite the havoc as it had before. So the life story can provide some clues and inspirations. This third bullet, I think in some ways deserves a bit more prominence, but I've sometimes seen families where everybody in the family kind of does a different thing to respond to behavior. Try to get on the same page, have a script about what's going on. I think this can be very, very therapeutic. So for example, let's say your mother has just moved into memory care. Instead of every family member sort of, saying something different when she says, I want to go home, maybe you can develop a script. One of my favorites is, Mom, I'm sorry that you don't want to be here right now. I know it's a tough time for you, Mom, but Mom, the doctor wants you to be here for now. You need to build your strength. I think those are $1 million words. They're so great. Mom, the doctor wants you to be here for now. You need to build your strength. Or the doctor wants you to have in-home care or something like that as well. That can be a really good technique. Double down on the activities the person enjoys. I have family sometimes who call me and says, Mother won't do this, Mother won't do that, Mother won't do this, Mother won't do that. And as we talk, I'll say, now, does she do this? Is there anything she does? And sometimes you discover she likes to dance, or she enjoys watching a music videos. Well, if there's one or two things she really likes, double down. And then the last bullet there, I know the climate in the Northwest can be very changeable. But I'm a big fan of being outdoors. It's sensory, it's spiritual, it fights depression. Get them out in the sunshine when you have it. And even if it's kind of a cooler day, bundle them up and go for a walk and be outside. All of that can be good, along with, of course, pet therapy can be terrific as well. And when it comes again to behavioral challenges, again, we can probably talk about this a lot more in the future, but certainly a progressive provider like Era Living is always working hard to reduce psychotropic meds, these psych medicines. They don't really work all that well, and they often have side effects like the greater risk of falling down or some cardiac issues. Now, again, these psychotropic meds, they really can save the day when someone has some, really dangerous, difficult behavior that's damaging their quality of life or maybe even scaring their family. But in general, hugs are better than drugs. Be careful with the psychotropic meds. As my nurse friends say, start low and go slow. So again, as we think about what is the treatment for Alzheimer's disease, well, here you have some of them. Good food, music, art, lifelong learning, exercise, time outdoors, playing aerobics, all of these help the person feel safe, secure, valued, and productive. And I'm really delighted because an enormous sadness for me during the pandemic is there are companies that said, okay, we've got to stop doing activities. We've got to keep people safe. Well, to me, it's not the medical model versus the social model. You can easily build sociability and social visiting, even I think during a pandemic. And I'm very proud of Era Living because they never stopped doing activities even during the pandemic. Again, activities, just a few things here. Very powerful examples of unstructured engagement, just little things you can do without any preparation. Ask for advice on a recipe, do singing, notice a bird outside, give a hand massage, purposeful activities, wrapping some presents together. I used to keep wrapping paper in my mom's room and I'd bring things in to wrap, matching shirts and ties, baking dog biscuits for the local animal shelter, even summers here, visiting various ice cream stands and keeping a little diary. And maybe you publish your own Yelp review guide or Zagat guide and rate the various ice cream stores, take some fun pictures of you and mom at the ice cream place. These are all kind of fun things you can do to add some love and friendship and happiness into the situation. Music is particularly powerful. Song lyrics and music actually live in a different part of the brain than words and language. And most people with dementia actually retain a connection to music even after their words and language have failed them, right? So I'm a huge fan of the late Dr. Oliver Sacks, really one of my heroes, and a very famous neurologist. He wrote a beautiful book about music in the brain called Musicophilia. And he talks about how music is so essential and how it touches emotion and connection. On a very practical level, get some music into mom and dad's bedroom. And if they're not wanting to take a shower, sometimes you can put on their favorite Nat King Cole song or their favorite country western song, and you just change the mood. It fosters happiness. And I've had a caregiver who literally danced her way into the shower with her husband. Thank you, Louis Armstrong. Okay. Now I mentioned lifelong learning. I'm sure some of you thought, well, what on earth is David talking about when it comes to dementia and learning? Well, I think it's so interesting with the internet today to devise small classes and talk about important topics, because I think novelty and curiosity still remain with dementia. Even if they forget you've talked about something 20 or 30 minutes later, in the moment, they enjoy the experience of learning. So here's just sort of a fun Washington-themed activity. I think Era Living staff have done this because they very much embrace some of the activities I write out in the Best Friends books. But let's think about apples, okay? What can you do with apples? Well, you can make a list of foods made with apples, apple pie, apple cakes, apple turnover, apple strudel, old sayings with apples. You can, what is it? An apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? You're the apple of my eye. Songs with apples. Don't sit under the apple tree with anybody else but me. Get some apples from the store, cut them up and do a taste test, vote on your favorite, discuss varieties. Is there really a Granny Smith? Was a Fuji apple from Japan? Read about the legendary Johnny Appleseed, Sir Isaac Newton, who discovered or wrote about the idea of gravity when an apple fell on his head. Apple computers, you get the drift here. Nostalgic art, old posters, art projects. It's amazing what you could even do with the simple idea around apples. It makes for great intergenerational activities. I've had families who really almost program a different theme every week, and certainly many communities like Era Living will build this kind of activity into their activity calendar. Exercise, I've already covered this pretty well, I think, but very good for the brain and body, prevents falls. I recommend it twice a day. And as we transition and wind down this, I think I've done a jam-packed hour here, probably too many topics to cover. I'm gonna maybe wind down and just share my appreciation for you as families and professional caregivers on this webinar today. Rosalind Carter, the former First Lady, after she left the White House, really devoted herself to caregiving issues. And I love this quote: there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver. Rosalind Carter. So many of us, even in my own neighborhood, most of my neighbors are caregivers in some capacity. And so we do want to recognize that 1 in 3 families are touched by disease. And it's important to know that families have emotionally, physically, financial stresses around caregiving, and we always want to be very supportive of them. So for those of you who are family members on this webinar today, let me just throw a few quick ideas from myself. Understand that family disagreements and conflicts are common. Try to take that longer term perspective that, this too shall pass, and it's very tough to make decisions. So do your best to be forgiving. If you are the primary caregiver, do ask for help with specific requests and needs. I still have, for example, caregivers, a husband or wife who says, well, my kids don't do anything for me. And I'll say, well, have you asked? Oh, they should know what I need. Well, yes, they probably should. But you see, if you call your son and say, hey, son, I'm out of briefs. I need this and this. Can I email you or text you a list or give you a list on the phone? Can you stop at Costco for me and pick these up? I need them by tomorrow at noon. Now, maybe your son will let you down, but if you can make a very specific request and try several times, hopefully you will get them involved. And I have adult children who often say, my parents won't let me or are critical. They don't want me to help. So try not to get into that kind of lose-lose dynamic. Encourage family members to learn as much as they can, attend support groups. Consider hiring a geriatric care manager for support and recommendations, a fairly new field out there with these geriatric care managers who often can come in, give you an assessment, make recommendations. And the great thing is if you do have some family conflict and it's Nurse Betty, the geriatric care manager who's recommending something, I think it takes a lot of the tension away from the discussion. So it's not me saying that we need to look at assisted living now, that really mom can't live by herself anymore. It's the expert who's telling us to do that. And finally, because I know denial runs strong, many people at dementia, particularly early on, they can kind of give that Academy Award-winning performance. Finally, you can, Medicare will cover an evaluation from a neuropsychologist who will give mom or dad a memory test and ask questions and draw a clock face and do this sort of exam. And if a neuropsychologist does this and writes a 6 or 7 page report and says that your 85-year-old mother thinks she's 40, she thinks Eisenhower's in the White House and she can't do this and can't do that, when the psychologist really writes this letter saying mother's profoundly confused, I think it's very hard when you share that letter with the whole family. It's hard for people to still stay in denial and not want to get some help, okay? Coming out of the pandemic, pardon me here, I'm just gonna do one little edit here. Coming out of the pandemic, again, I want you to research the best you can, local services. I want you to recognize that when you are looking at services, it's so important to ask about staff training, ask to see if they have a contemporary medical care, but don't wait and wait and wait to use services. I think when you make a game plan for the future, this is a great time to do this because services are opening up now in the pandemic. And finally, the benefits of residential memory care. I know many of you on this call are interested in memory care and residential care. I will share with you that there are 3 or 4 key reasons why I choose memory care for my own mother. And there are 3 or 4 reasons why I think memory care can be very helpful. Safety. When someone particularly is living by themselves or living with another elder, it can be very tough because in the middle of the night, someone can get up and walk out the front door. If someone's by themselves, they can become victims of financial abuse. They can fall to the latest internet scam. A friend of mine in Sausalito, California lost $10,000 to the IRS, to an IRS scam, pardon me. So safety is one reason you choose memory care. Socialization. Again, it can be so hard. Friends and family often fall away when you're a caregiver, and we know that socialization is so important. So when you are in assisted living or utilizing services, particularly like assisted living memory care, this neighborhood of best friends can really come into play and be powerful. Personal care. Sometimes people with dementia, they begin to sort of lose this brain-body connection, and they struggle to take a shower, to change their briefs. Many family members, they just really fall apart under the pressure of personal care. Now, sometimes people move to memory care and they can be pretty obstinate and challenging for staff to, do this personal care. But usually we find one caregiver who has that magic touch with your mom or dad, or a team approach that can really help get that shower accomplished, get the brief changed. So that is one reason why, again, why do you choose residential memory care? Safety, socialization, personal care. And I have to say too, so many of the friends I've met who become caregivers, it's so easy to become the bad guy, right? So easy to become the bad guy. So if you make a placement and it goes well and you find a place with a good contemporary vision and good staff training and good activities, what happens is you're allowed to let go of some of the hard work of maintaining that relationship and hopefully just have some fun with your mom and be in a better place as this dementia journey continues. So thank you all very much for letting me throw a lot at you here in this 1 hour. It's been a very momentous week in the world of dementia care, but I want to roll back all the way back to the 1980s for one of, again, a real hero in the field who was a British man who was one of the first researchers to look at this issue from the point of view of caregivers. And I always thought it was great that Dr. Tom Kitwood said, caregivers are physicians of the human spirit. And so I think that's great that Dr. Kitwood is doing a little shout out to all of you on this webinar today. So thank you very much. We do have some time for questions, discussion. I'll mention that my email is very simple, davidtroxel@gmail.com. Always happy to answer some questions. I'm on Facebook. You can type into the little search engine best friends approach in your phone or computer and like the best friends approach. And I send out lots of articles and ideas. I'm on LinkedIn. And of course, Era Living also has its website with lots of helpful information they're developing. I'm not sure if it's quite live yet, but a great resource center for dementia care. And I'll even have a few little blogs and videos on that myself. Again, thank you all very much. I think now we have time for some questions and discussions. So I will actually stop sharing my screen and turn it over to the great team at Era Living. I see even a few familiar faces here from the past webinars. Thank you all very much, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you, David. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. So it looks like if you guys have any questions after David's presentation, please feel free to type them into the chat and then I will read them aloud. The first one I have here, it says, are some persons institutionalized too early? Example, one falls, hits their head, and family immediately institutionalizes them.
Okay, that's a really interesting question. And I have to share with you that honestly, the opposite tends to be true. You know, people often wait too long. And to me, one benefit of residential care is that sociability, ability to be in activities. And if you wait till someone is almost really at the nursing home level and, you know, no mobility and not able to focus and be part of that, that can be a loss as well. Every family is a bit different. I will say that falls can be so deadly for the elderly. And so I think a fall is not necessarily a bad reason to make a placement if you can find a community that really works hard to minimize falls. But you know, again, everyone's a little bit different, so I can't quite weigh in. My guess, though, is that most families don't rush to make a placement, but certainly every case is different.
Great. Does anyone else have any other questions that they want to add to the chat section here? If not, that's okay. David, you are, oh wait, here we go. Is there a specific kind of, that is more effective?
Okay, so around music, a couple of things I'd like to recommend is certainly I love music from someone's sort of developmental years. So, you know, for me, it might be someday music from the 1970s, maybe the 80s even. You know, we always think about senior citizens loving big band music and Frank Sinatra, but I have to tell you, I've met seniors today who love the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and Bob Dylan. So I think find people's favorites. You know, if someone always loved Tom Jones from Las Vegas or Elvis or, you know, Aerosmith or, you know, something like that, I would absolutely play it. I will say one interesting thing about music in general and about activities. You know, my mother, Dorothy, you all met her through the photograph. I adored my mother, but I have to be honest, she was a bit of a snob. You know, she loved classical music and opera. And one day I walked into memory care and they were playing old episodes of Hee Haw. If any of you know that old, really pretty awful TV show with, you know, yucky yuck humor from, you know, donkeys and country western. And my mother would love every minute of it. And sometimes people with dementia kind of forget that they don't do that. So I've actually met people who've never listened to opera, listen to it and enjoy it. People who like country western music now and never did before. So don't be afraid to try it. But, you know, music in general lifts us all up. And the contemporary view of dementia care, and I'm really so happy that many of my friends at Era Living so embrace this, is that people with dementia are sort of like the rest of us, all the same needs, emotions, feelings. And if I'm feeling down or if I'm feeling a little bit tired, what do I do here at my home office? I put on my music and it lifts my spirits. And the same is true for people with dementia almost always.
I always had really good success with Christmas carols.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm in no rush to leave, so I'd certainly welcome any other questions or comments. Okay.
All right, how do you respond to accounts from residents that include delusion? Some part of me must be true. Some parts must be true.
Okay. So a delusion is a fixed false idea. And they're very interesting. Okay, I might develop a delusion that, you know, you owe me $10,000. You know, I lent it to you and you never paid me back, right? Now, again, maybe I'm saying that to someone who absolutely doesn't owe me money, but maybe I'm confusing him with someone who does, right? I've seen delusions where you can kind of think them through, and maybe there is even some kind of psychoanalytic reason why that delusion's there. But I've also seen ones that just seem to come out of the blue. One of my all-time favorites was a gentleman in Santa Barbara who woke up one morning and was convinced the neighbors had moved the fence in 5 feet to steal his land. He was convinced of it, right? Now, I don't think that really happened in his past. So when there are delusions, I do look to the life story, see what they're about. But the technique, and this is what I used in Santa Barbara where I lived with a gentleman who was convinced the neighbors had stolen his land. We said, gee, Marty, I'm so sorry this might have happened. We're looking into it. We've talked to the city. Oh my goodness, I'm sure this must be very upsetting. You see, people with dementia, like the rest of us, want to feel like you're on their side, that you're listening to them, that you're not just negating it. So if you, with a delusion, kind of maybe apologize if it's aimed at you, if you say we're working on it, I'm so sorry, we're trying. What tends to happen after a few days or a few weeks is, poof, it just goes away. So always ask what's going, why do you feel that way? What's happening? Take it seriously. I'm guessing some of these delusions do maybe have some basis in the past, but others don't.
Great.
I see part two. Let me talk about part two quickly. Or a story that someone has taken her out of the house to play cards and the person actually hasn't. Well, there's a great word. Now, you should try to use this word today in conversations. One of my favorite words, confabulation, okay? And people with dementia tend to confabulate. And what that means is maybe I walk away from home. My family finds me 3 blocks away. They say, oh my gosh, David, how did you get here? Oh, this very nice lady named Kim picked me up in her red Ford Mustang, and we went for an ice cream cone, and she had a German Shepherd in the back seat. The German Shepherd let me pet him and gave me a big kiss, and I had a wonderful visit with this family. Well, maybe I just walk there, and none of that is true, okay? Well, it isn't that they're really lying or knowingly lying, but they have a memory gap. They don't know really why they got there. They almost backpedal back in, trying to fill in the gaps, and they kind of create this fanciful story in a way, maybe to save face, but also just to kind of make sense of it. So that is something very common. Sometimes you just have to laugh and smile. Sometimes they're pretty remarkable. But if someone didn't know any better, you would totally believe it, because often they're very rich in detail.
Wonderful. That puts us at about time here. I just want to thank you, David, for taking the time to spend with us this afternoon. We really, really appreciate it. And I think we all have, we've read your books, we've heard your presentations, but I think we all learn something new every time we chat. So thank you for that. We will be emailing everyone an evaluation form, and we would love to hear your feedback on this particular presentation, as well as any suggestions you may have for future Zoom presentations. If you have any questions about Era Living Memory Care, you can give us a call here at Ida Culver House Broadview at 206-361-1989, or at the Gardens, Town Square in Bellevue, 425-688-1900. So again, I am Julie Robb at Ida Culver, and this concludes our presentation today. Thank you so much, David, and thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.